It's Christmas Day of 1980, and a man who was just walking his dog along a dike had just alerted authorities to what he believed was a body. Upon arriving to the crime scene, police were horrified to what they saw. There, lying on her back, was the body of a young girl who was reported missing in mid-November. Her body was heavily mutilated, her chest and abdomen being stabbed and slashed open, and around her neck, there were obvious signs of heavy strangulation. Police did not know it at the time, but this would be the first victim of 11, all between the ages of 9 and 18, and most of which would only be found after the extremely controversial cash for bodies deal. This is the story of the Beast of British Columbia. Clifford Olson was born January 1st of 1940 at St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver, and even made it into the newspaper on the day of his birth as a New Year's baby. He had 2 brothers and a sister. Not so much is known about Olson in his youth, with what I could find usually being statements from his family or from the people who knew him, which, by all account, turned out to be good people. The reason for this is that even in his early life, Olson was known to be a bully and a loner. His siblings grew up to be normal, middle-class people who got jobs, got families, and lived their lives normally. His parents would eventually break contact with him and eventually give up hope that he would ever change. What is known is that his family moved to Edmonton, Alberta when he was born, but by the age of 5 they moved back to Richmond, BC. A former teacher whom taught Olson claimed that he was a show-off and that he always was intentionally misbehaving. Even when he knew he was going to be caught, Olson seemed to seek out the intention, almost like he enjoyed it. This, along with other local rumors that he was torturing town pets, including bunnies and cats, were the first clear signs of Olson's psychopathic tendencies. By the age of 10, he was skipping school, and by the age of 15, he had failed his grade multiple times. Olson was jailed for the first time just after finishing 8th grade at the age of 17 for burglary. Over the next 24 years, Olson would rack up a staggeringly high 83 criminal convictions, ranging from just about anything you can think of. Everything from possession of stolen property, possession of firearms, forgery, false pretenses, parole violation, impaired driving, theft, burglary, armed robbery, escape from lawful custody, as well as various SA charges. Between 1957 and 1968, Olson would escape prison 7 different times, each time being caught and being put back in prison. He was even given parole in 1959 and 1972, but it was revoked both times because Olson always went back to his criminal tendencies. By the time Clifford Olson was 41 years old, he had only spent 4 years of his adult life not in jail, which is utterly insane. Olson was sent to multiple different prisons and was changed frequently due to him being an at-risk offender, due to his sexual crimes. He was also known in prison to be a snitch, and was even awarded $3,500 after a gang of prisoners beat him up because he snitched about how they were getting drugs into the prison. The reason cited for him getting this money was due to his, quote, unusual degree of moral and physical courage for being a snitch. Olson was released from prison for the final time before his first murder on September 7th of 1980. A month later, a 12-year-old girl is reported missing, but due to how police handled missing children and people in general at that time, her disappearance is not deemed as suspicious, and she is deemed a runaway. Her body would later be found on Christmas Day. After this murder, it would be until April of 1981 until the Beast of British Columbia would strike again. This time, a 13-year-old girl goes missing outside of Surrey, British Columbia. Her body would then be found 5 months later. 6 days later, a 15-year-old boy whom was visiting Vancouver went missing, and 2 weeks later, his beaten body was found. It was suspected that he was beaten to death with a hammer. Amongst all this, a month later in May, Olson actually got married to the mother of his only child, whom had no idea Olson was committing these murders. 3 days after his wedding day, on May 19th, a 16-year-old girl whom was hitchhiking from her boyfriend's place was picked up by Olson and brutally killed in the nearby forest. This frequency of killings would stay persistent, and it would not be until August 12th, when Olson attempted to pick up 2 female hitchhikers, that he was stopped by police and arrested on the spot. While they had been watching him for a while now, they had no probable cause, but now they had all that they needed. 6 days later, on August 18th, Clifford Olson was charged with the murder of one of the victims that were found 3 weeks prior. His victim count totaling to 11, all between the ages of 9 and 18. It was believed that he essayed all, or at least most of the victims, and their main cause of death was blunt force trauma, stabbing, or strangulation. The trial for Clifford Olson started on January 11th of 1982. Olson's initial stance was that of not guilty, but then, just 3 days into the trial, he reversed his plea completely, claiming guilty to all 11 charges of first-degree murder. He would be sentenced immediately that same day for 11 concurrent sentences with no parole eligibility for 25 years, which is the maximum in Canada. This was to be served in Canada's Supermaximum Security Special Handling Unit in Saint-Anne-des-Plaines, Quebec. Olson was also seen by multiple psychologists during this time, who determined that Olson was a true psychopath, acting only with momentary wants and needs, and knowing full well the consequences of his actions, just simply not caring. He never once showed any remorse or genuine care at all, and it is believed that all emotions he ever showed were simply learned or emulated. Just 3 days after the trial, on January 14th, the first media reports would surface that police had made a deal with the devil. An agreement was reached between police and the Beast of BC, wherein Olson's wife would receive $10,000 for every body that Olson was able to provide to authorities. He included what he called a freebie to show that he was serious. This is what ultimately caused Olson to change his plea deal to guilty. His wife would ultimately immediately end up filing for divorce and returning all of the money back to the government that was given to her after the bodies were recovered. Even behind bars, Olson seemed to have a knack for instigating even further hatred for him. A newspaper from 1983 shows that Olson was attempting to barter with authorities, claiming to have knowledge of 12 more victims that he killed. He would ultimately end up retracting this statement, and it was deemed to be a complete lie. In 1997, he once again made an outrageous request. Under the faint hope clause, Olson attempted to gain parole just 15 years into his 25-year sentence. His appeal in court was instantly shouted down and thrown out in minutes. In 2006, Olson once again attempted to go to the National Parole Board, this time due to his 25-year sentence being completed. By this time, Olson was known to be a guiltless, cold-hearted murderer whom everyone, inmates and the public alike, knew and hated. This time, it took the parole board 30 minutes to once again toss out his parole request. In 2010, it was reported that Olson was getting $1,100 a month in old age income and guaranteed income supplement. This sparked national backlash, which suspended all prisoner benefits and income until after they had been released. A year later, on September 21st of 2011, the mother of one of the victims would receive a call from Corrections Canada, informing that Olson had terminal cancer and was days away from death. On September 30th, a different family would receive a call from Corrections Canada, informing them that Olson had died in prison. Clifford Olson was one of the sickest killers Canada had ever seen, and was coined as being Canada's first modern serial killer. The victims' families were glad to at least have closure, and could at least have some solace in knowing that he spent the remainder, and in fact most of his life in general, in prison. But a large portion of people and the victims' families could not have any peace until that they knew the beast was dead. As why victims would receive those calls from Corrections Canada. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more content from me. I really appreciate the outpouring of support and newcomers to this channel, and I'm so happy to have you guys here with me. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace, guys.